we'll have Jonathan Scales Fourchestra, and I'm going to limit my description of this because I want the music to speak for itself. It's wonderful and exciting, and I appreciate everybody for being here.
Hey everyone, how's it going? So my name is Jonathan Scales. This is my band. We're called Jonathan Scales Fourchestra. It's a very interesting name for a three-piece group. We won't talk about that too much. But we're just going to start off by just playing. And whenever we're in these kind of intimate settings, I like to do a mix between playing, talking, answering questions, things like that. So as we kind of get into it and kind of warm up and do our thing, if you have any questions, just keep them in mind because there's going to be a time where I'm going to want to know if you guys want to know anything. All right, but right now we're just going to make music with each other. We haven't seen each other in a few weeks, so this should be fun. Let's do Folks Ball.
Oh, man. Start off with it.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Why you pity pattern?
Wait. Maybe a little faster.
faster.
A little slightly faster. Yeah.
Just a hair.
Yeah. some of these more intimate settings, I kind of play it day by day, depending on how I feel, depending on how I feel in the space. And today I feel very leisurely, so I hope that's okay. So it's not going to be the rigid classroom structure that you all might be accustomed to. So right now, right off the bat, are there any questions, comments, or concerns about anything that has transpired so far today? Any questions? Yes?
How long have you guys been playing together?
Okay, so this particular band, this particular unit, we've been together for, I think, 5 years, right? You're the
Yes.
historian.
Yes, 5 years.
Yeah, I think
in
5.
October.
Yeah, October will make
Hey, Cecil.
yeah. October will make 5 years. So I started this band, I think, 13 years ago, 13 and a half, almost 14 years ago. Wait a minute. 15.
Yes, 15.
15 years ago. Hey, Jeremy.
That was 15
Yeah,
years
that's
ago,
right.
man.
Yeah, so I started this band about 15 years ago, and different people have come in and out over the times, and I tend to look for musicians that are kind of pushing the boundaries on their instruments, and also who can kind of handle my music, because my music's a little difficult, it's more complicated, more intricate than the average thing. So I always try to surround myself with musicians that are like-minded, who are also kind of pushing the boundaries on their instruments. So, but yeah.
Could you explain a little bit for folks that don't understand your instrument?
Yes.
Is there a way to?
Yes. Good question. I was going to get to that, so thank you. Before we get into it, I'm going to pretend like this is kindergarten class for a second. All right, kids. Does anyone know the name of this instrument? Let's hear it.
And drums.
You know, between all of that, there was somebody who knows confidently can say it out loud right now. Go. All those were kind of like a mix.
Kettle drums.
That's incorrect. Part of that is correct.
Steel drums?
Steel drums or steel pan. So what you'll typically find is, if you're from Trinidad, where this instrument comes from, most people will call it steel pan. And if you're really in the culture of the instrument, we just call it pan, right? So, but here in the States, we tend to call them steel drums. And I just gave away where they're from Trinidad. But usually I ask and people say Jamaica or Hawaii or Africa or something random. But these instruments come from Trinidad, which is the southernmost island in the Caribbean. Who can tell me what they're made of specifically? We know they're steel, but what specifically are they made of? Barrels. What kind of barrels?
Steel.
What kind of steel barrels? It's one word I'm looking for in particular.
Oil barrel.
Oil barrels. So this, at one point, was an oil barrel, but it's been refashioned and chromed. So you see how inside there's the different inventions? So long story short, because I don't like to get too much deep into the history, but in Trinidad, it was a British colony, as a lot of things were in the world, and they brought over people from Africa to work, as they did here in the States. But one of the main differences in Trinidad is they banned music from music and musical instruments that came from Africa were literally illegal in Trinidad. And so at the time, what people would do is, because they couldn't use their djembes or other drums or wind instruments, they would just take anything they could find, whether it was like a scrap piece of metal or pieces of wood or a biscuit tin or things like that. And fast forward, the brief history is, at one point someone took just like a biscuit tin and found out they can hit 2 different notes on there, and then said, what if we expand and expand and expand? So eventually, a guy by the name of Ellie Manette said, you know what if we use these 55-gallon barrels that the Navy was leaving behind, and they, refashioned it from there, and it was very crude in the 40s. So if you hear steel drum sounds that are in the 40s or 50s, you'll hear that the tone is a little different than these. These are kind of like, the classical, Stradivarius violin quality of the steel pan. So it's come a long way, but they're originally made from oil barrels. Yep. And so with hammers, they sink down the surface. So this was once a flat surface, as you see in any barrel, and it's been sinked by hand, and then it's been crafted to where see how those indentions, where they're kind of demarcated, each of those are notes, and a tuner is able to tune each of those areas, just like you can tune a piano or a violin or anything else, and that's how I'm able to get all the pitches there. So, good question. And there's so much more to that story that we don't even have time to get into today, between the history of Trinidad and between just the scientific construction of how people have been able to create this instrument from scratch. But also like to tell people with that the people that really developed this instrument were really teenagers from the ghettos of Trinidad at the time. You know, so people who, they didn't have much, they just knew they really had this vision. They also were hearing the music of Europe, and they wanted to be able to replicate it and have their own cultural identity, since their original instruments from Africa were illegal. So it's a long, rich history, and not just, you know, Margaritaville. Yeah. It's more than just the typical thing you see like on a cruise ship or anything like that. So I always like to let people know that.
I have a question.
Yes.
What are you playing? What kind of sticks are those?
Good question. So these are just aluminum shafts with rubber tips that is actually surgical tubing. But they are typically either made out of wood or aluminum. And it doesn't take much. They're really light. Yep. Any other questions right now about anything for any of us?
Pans come in all kinds of sizes as well, right?
Yeah, so in the steel drum family, it's kind of like if you ever see a full steel drum band, like there's one at App State, the Steely Pan Steel Band. That's where I started actually.
Nice.
So they do come in different sizes in terms of the ranges, but they're all made of the 55-gallon barrels. So, for example, if you see someone playing just one steel drum by itself, that's kind of the soprano voice of the steel orchestra, which ironically is called the tenor. Long story. But they have all their notes on one drum in this kind of a higher range. This is more like the alto voice of the steel orchestra, where all the notes are spread across two pans and have a deeper range than the soprano voice. And then there's people with three drums that are called guitar pans, which are spread across three pans, lower register, and they're called guitars because they kind of strum the chords if you have a full steel orchestra. Then you have all the way down to bass, which will be a full oil barrel with only three notes each, and it takes 6 full barrels to have the full chromatic scale. So yeah, if you ever go to YouTube and you type in Trinidad steel drum band or Panorama, which is a big steel drum band competition in Trinidad, you will get to see what it looks like to have a 100-piece steel orchestra with different sizes.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Tenor pans and, I'm sorry, tenors are the one pan, right?
Yeah.
Double seconds. Is there more notes in a tenor pan? Because it's one drum, and you said it's like the higher. So
Are there more drums on that than on this? Or are there more notes?
Yeah.
No, they're not, because I have a lower range. So the lowest note on a tenor pan is that. So I can go further. And then the highest note on a tenor pan is only maybe like a whole step higher than that. So this is a more versatile instrument than when someone has like one drum. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. Yes.
How do you learn to play that kind of music?
That's a good question. So there's two answers for that. One thing I like to tell people is that this instrument is really an instrument like any other. You just might not come across it as easily. So for me, when I got to Appalachian State, there was a steel drum band there, and I was a saxophone player and a percussionist. So when I got to App State, this was available as an extracurricular program, and the way that I learned was it was just available at the school. We had the key to the room for the people that were in the band, and the notes were written on the drum. So that when I first learned music, I say, okay, where's F sharp? All right, F sharp, F sharp, F sharp. Oh, there it is. You know, so it was just like a long process of just, learning the instrument, learning the technique, learning how to get the best sound out. And I say that all that to say it really is just like any instrument in the sense that some people learn more by ear, some people take lessons. But I kind of learned just being left alone with the instrument for hours and hours at school, having access to the room and just practicing.
Is there music written out on lines and spaces where you could read?
Yeah, so with this instrument, you can play anything that you could play on a piano. You can read music, but because all of those notes are demarcated specifically for pitches, then that means you could play classical. You know, I can read that, and I learned that from reading the sheet music. So yes, good question.
The music that y'all are playing, has it been written out? I mean, it just felt to me like you guys were doing a lot of improvisation.
Yeah, so
I just wondered, is there a structured, of a written manuscript?
yeah, so with my music, it's kind of modern classical inspired, but it's also jazz inspired. So there's a lot of it that is written out, and there's a lot of the forms that have to happen in certain ways. But within that, there's a lot of artistic freedom. So I might write the chords a certain way or write the rhythm on the bass a certain way, but he has a freedom to interpret those things as he feels. And of course, if he gets out of line, you know, I might have to talk to him. You know, we might have to come to. If he's going too crazy, I might say, hey, you know, like that was really cool, but like if you could just play a B flat there, that'd be great. And the same thing with Mason. There might be times where I say, okay, I'm looking for this type of energy from the drums. I'm looking for this type of kick drum pattern, this type of snare pattern, and then he'll do his thing, and I'll say, okay, actually, if you could do more on the snare for this part, I would really like how that sounds. So there's a lot of crafting that goes along with that, but there's a lot of artistic freedom. There's a lot of the music where if you buy our sheet music, which we actually have some available today, you can see the structure of the song and the melodies and the chords, and then the forms, and also the forms, and then the way that we interpret the music. There's a lot of open interpretation, that, just as you would find in jazz. Yeah, like two jazz trios could play the same piece of music, and they would be interpreted differently. But if you know the song, you would still know it. It's kind of like that.
The guy over there is playing so many different percussions.
Yeah.
How does he know which? Is that written out for you? Which?
Oh, God, and in terms of that, so that's not necessarily written out. So especially with drums, that's a good question. A lot of the stylistic traditions are kind of passed down generationally. So if I say, all right, this is going to be kind of like a funk groove, or this is going to be like a samba, you know, he kind of knows what those rhythms are culturally. And then, because we're speaking the same musical language, I could say something to him like, all right, this section is going to be like a samba, except, you know, I want there to be these hits where you stop on these beats particularly. And then this other part, I wanted to make it more like funk based, but kind of have a little, you know, swing. So I can speak that to him, and he can kind of craft his playing around that. And you know, also he's like kind of listening to what we're playing and interacting. So we're all kind of interacting with each other, and while we're improvising, while we're kind of sticking to the structure of what the musical plan is. So yeah, good question. Yes.
How many years individually, like how many years have you played and you
Drums I've been playing all my life.
Which is how many years?
Yes.
You stop. About 29, 30, almost, just about. Yep, my mom put me out and got me started right away. Drumsticks, it was crazy. Sorry.
So I started playing the saxophone in the 6th grade, which was 1996.
96?
96.
I was 5.
Yeah, so I started playing saxophone in the 6th grade, 1996. Can't remember how old I was. But Then I started playing percussion when my sophomore year of high school. And then I started playing the steel pan when I got to App State in 2002. So speaking of which, I can't believe I've been playing this for 20 years now. It seems like I just started. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been playing about the same amount of time, about 20 years on and off. Started on upright bass through middle school and high school. Not too long after I started on upright, my grandmother surprised me with a bass guitar, and the rest was history.
Cool. So should we play a little bit more? Do you guys want to? Any other questions?
Yeah, play.
Okay, cool. Let's play. Speaking of the compositions and things, it feels nice for me as a composer that these guys know so much of my music that I can just call out random songs. So this is one that I wrote when I was in the 10th grade. I started composing very young, so this is one that I wrote when I was in 10th grade. I probably wrote it on saxophone, but I probably just used like a computer software to write the music. And it's kind of developed a lot over the years. So when I was in 10th grade, it didn't sound quite like this, but these are the notes that I wrote and things. So.
We love you.
You know what? I decided I don't want to play this one right now. I want to save it for later. Changed my mind. I made an executive decision. I'll explain later, but
Oh, gotcha.
we'll do this one later. So let's play the track. All right. All right.
It's like a quarterback, just audible.
All right. about that one. That was a crazy one. So, I think we have time for another one, according to the schedule, right? How many people have somewhere to go, like, how many people have somewhere to be at 2 o'clock? All right. So if it goes over, then, if you have to leave, I won't be offended. Only a little bit. I will be offended a little bit. So just keep that in mind. If you're okay with bearing the weight of having disappointed me by having to go to your obligation that was already scheduled, it's okay. All right. Any other questions right now as we wrap up this last
Are
part?
your two drums different, or are they just,
Good question. So with this style of drums, which are, like I mentioned, this is the alto voice of the steel pan family. They're called double seconds, and they're actually different from each other. And do you play music? Do you play any instrument? Okay, so for example, if you go to a piano and you skip every other note, start on one and then skip every other note, you're gonna get one side of my drums. So if you started on E, for example, you would go E, E, F sharp, G sharp, B flat, C, D, E, all the way up. And on this side, I have every other note. All right, starting on F. So between the two of them, I have all the notes that you have on any instrument.
So individually, they're tuned, is that a whole tone scale that I'm hearing?
10 points to you. These are whole tone scales. Yeah, so you have a whole tone scale on this side, a whole tone scale on this side.
Yeah, and then
Combined, you get the full chromatic range. Yep. Yep. But they're not really in order,
right.
so it's really complicated. This particular set of drums is pretty complicated. Yeah. Good question.
What's the interval when you hit one note? What is it ringing up there? There's two prominent.
Oh, so like the overtones.
Yes.
There's a lot going on in the overtones on these drums, because when you hit one note, sure, it's kind of resonating that one area, but it's also resonating the whole drum, so it's picking up all the other frequencies. So you'll hear the whole overtone series if you listen close enough.
Okay.
But primarily, you hear the octave, you hear the fifth.
Gotcha.
You might hear maybe the third on top of that.
They're sympathetic, not necessarily coming out of that one range. They're sympathetic notes coming from.
Exactly.
the drums.
Exactly. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question for you, John.
Yes.
Super nerdy, but I've noticed most of the time you're using a match grip, but every once in a while I'll see a traditional thrown in. Is there a particular reason? Is it just for the style? I know there's a lot of fusion stuff going on.
Well, I kind of came up, the snare is like one of my instruments. Classically, I came up playing this instrument first. I came up in jazz due to my father, but my mom was a classical musician. She's the one who actually got me started on percussion. But it started with a lot of control with this instrument. There was a guy when I was really, really young, one of like my first instructors. His name was Kevin Walker. Probably means nothing to you, but he was a super good dude, and he told me that like when you sit down to the drums, it's not like you don't start here and play in. You play here and then you come out. So a lot of that has to do with how you tie in the rest of the instruments to the snare. So that has a lot to do with technique. So I went down that whole thing, and I'm like, okay, you have American, then you have German, then you have French, and then you have traditional. And for most people who don't know, whenever you see a drummer playing with their left hand like this, it's because back in the Civil War times, they used to have a snare drum that was about the size of this floor tom, and it was very huge, and it would always lean to the left side of their body. So for physics purposes, it was just easier to strike the drum with your left hand in this position because it leaned this way. Instead of having to hit it like that, you would play it like this. So they call that traditional grip. So I do switch with them because I get different feels, and I get different like the stick bounces differently with different ones. Like, for example, with, I usually play French. French is kind of like thumbs on the top. American is kind of like a hybrid between the two. It's like your hand is in like German position, but it's kind of, so your thumb is on the side like it's German, but the stick is pointing straight like it's French, in a way. So you get that kind of control, and I hold the stick very back. And the reason why I switch between grips sometimes is sometimes I feel more control over like rudiments this way. But when I'm here, there's a couple things that are going on too. This is called bottom tight, top loose. So whenever I'm slinging, I'm kind of going this way, and that really helps bring projection out of the snare. And then there's some times when I'm trying to play really, really tight. And what I'll do is I'll tighten my thumb and my pinky, and I'll just use my fingers instead of my forearm. So that's kind of the same thing with my ride cymbal here. You know, I can do the finger thing in the back, and then I can tighten up the back and just kind of play open. So yeah, I kind of switch back in between those grips just to kind of get like a different feel. Yeah.
So we have time for one more. We're already technically over time, but we only have one person that's somewhere to be. So for this last one, I want to do something that's a little different, and I hope that as many people will participate in this as possible. But if you're not comfortable with it, I understand. So we've typically done this thing at the end of our shows where we realize that there's a certain energy that comes with music, and you can experience that when you're physically closer to the music. So for this last tune, if everyone who's willing would like to join us up here, you can stand wherever you would like around us. We want to welcome you to be here for this last tune. Don't be shy. Stand anywhere. Stand by the drums, stand on the bass. You know what? I'm actually gonna turn this way.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is a show right here.
Stand wherever you like.
Tim, what did you see? Okay.
I'm gonna stand over here. Yeah, I don't have any mics, so I can roll around.
Yeah, that's true. Get you some
That was it. This is Mason Gidry on the drums. Elon JD on the bass.
Jonathan Scales on the steel drum.
If you want to keep up with us, you can find us on all the social media things if you guys are into that. Also, we have some things for sale here. We're running really low on merch at the very beginning of the tour. We have to get some more inventory, but we do have music books. I think there's like 4 music books left. We have vinyl records. We have some posters, and also we have some codes that you can just scan, some QR codes. They have a bunch of links to all of our things, including like the Tiny Desk and websites, and there's a lot of free stuff too if you want to scan the code too. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.